Hey, sports fans, it's Larry Eder with RunBlogRun. This is Socialing the Distance, and we're featuring running icon Jeff Galloway. Jeff, I knew about you all through the 70s. I believe I met you at the Charleston Distance Classic in about
Absolutely.
1985.
Yeah.
And Dean Reinke was doing some stuff, and he had brought me down. And I remember after the run, you and I were doing a little bit of a cool down, and I asked you how you were doing, and you said, I'm doing great, but don't tell anybody. I said, what's up? He goes, I'm taking off maybe 1 or 2 days a week. And I said, wow, I've been taking off a day a week, and I thought I was weird. He goes, no, he goes, it really brings your energy back. And, I took your advice, and I ran my 2:47 right after that off really, I would take a day off after that long run. I think that's what you and I talked about. And if I needed a couple other easy days, I would do it. And it seemed to really work. And you built a movement from that. I think that is all the experiments on yourself. But we've got a lot of young readers who 1972 is a long time ago for them. So I want to kind of give them a little bit of a feel of where you came from, so where you're at today. In your notes, you talked about getting into running when you were 13. You were a freshman in high school?
Entering the 8th grade.
Wow. And did you have a good coach at the time? Did someone motivate you? Did you have a brother or sister who encouraged you to run, or why did you get into running?
No, I was an overweight, lazy kid. And so for that reason, I offer hope to those kids who are having trouble getting into running or any sport.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I must say that I have that is my fault.
No problem. That's the wonders of technology, Jeff,
Let me turn this off here.
Got it. Yeah, so what we were talking about was how you started in running. And you said you began in 8th grade. And kind of tell us a little bit what you remember motivating you at the time.
It's quite simple, and that is that my dad had been in the U.S. Navy
Okay.
and wanted to make it a career. Due to a defense cutback, he was a reservist and he got cut out, so he had to find a new job. He decided to teach, and the school where he taught is the school where I went.
Okay.
But because I had gone to 13 schools my first 7 years, and I was entering my 14th school,
Oh
I
my
never
gosh.
really, yeah, I never really got into any sports or physical activity, and
Sure.
I gained weight, and I
Mm-hmm.
was a very overweight, lazy kid. So the school that I went to, highly academic school, also required all boys to go out for strenuous sports after school. So my
Okay.
motivation was simple. I had to choose a sport during the winter of my 8th grade year. And having been the new kid in class 14 different times, I found it very difficult to meet other kids because I was
Mm-hmm.
only there for a few months at a time.
Okay.
But the people that I hung out with in that 8th grade year were cross country runners, mainly because they were friendly and clever. And, I had rapport with them, and they got me to go out for winter cross country. I
Okay.
really wasn't looking forward to it. I thought it was going to hurt. They said that I could lie to the coach and just tell him I was going to run on the trails, and all I had to do is jog 200 yards to the woods and hang out throwing rocks in the creek. So I did that the first 2 days, and as fate would have it, on the third day, an older kid caught me, and I had to run with his group. Well, a whole new world opened up within a couple of days because,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, these folks were not only clever and had interesting jokes, but they also had some gossip on the other kids at school. And I wanted to stay up and listen to this, but I couldn't the first few days, ended up
Sure.
exhausted. But within 10 minutes of finishing those early workouts, I felt several things I had never felt before. First of all, I had more energy than
Mhm.
I had felt, I think, ever in life.
Yeah.
Secondly, I felt a sense of empowerment that I had not felt. And I was able to go home and attack the mountain of homework that I had, and
Sure.
my grades improved dramatically. And
Mhm.
the third thing was my attitude. This was a very rough and conflicting type of prep school situation.
Sure.
I came to the run every day with all types of stress. And again, within 10 minutes, that stress was gone. I
Yeah.
didn't know what these changes were, but they turn out to be brain circuits that I identified when I did the research for my mental training book. And
Mhm.
it's quite well documented now, starting in the 1990s, that running turns on the circuits, brain circuits, for a better attitude, for more vitality, and for personal empowerment better than anything else.
That's cool. Um, you then went to, you didn't get a scholarship to college. You went to Wesleyan um, academics, and you ran with a young kid named Amby Burfoot, and was Bill Rogers an upperclassman at the time?
No, he actually was 3 years behind me. So we were together only 1 year when he was a
Okay.
freshman and I was a senior. And I actually tutored him in geology. He was having some trouble with his geology
Wow.
course, and I spent some time tutoring him. But yeah, that was totally serendipitous. None of us were offered any scholarships. We went to
Mhm.
Wesleyan for the academics. There were no scholarships at Wesleyan. And
Wow.
so we fell in with one another, and we pulled off one another. And by the way, we're still associating in various projects and pulling off one another in a very positive way.
What was your training like in college?
I steadily moved my weekly mileage from about 30 miles up to about 60 miles.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I was doing a decent amount of speed work. I was self-coached both in high school and in college. Our
Okay.
coach at Wesleyan had been a hurdler, and so
Okay.
he totally deferred to us to do our own workouts.
Mhm.
And I had a number of folks who would do these workouts with me. But I ended up at the end of my college career with the draft situation, and
Sure.
I uh, I had a draft number of 3, so I was going to go to
Oh my God.
Vietnam. And so I
Wow.
enlisted in the Navy, and I
Okay.
did go to Vietnam, but I was off the coast of Vietnam on a ship instead of being in country. And for 3 years, I was in the Navy,
Mhm.
got out, and my main motivation, starting 1970 to get to 72, was to avoid what I heard the guys on watch say almost every day. And that is, somebody on the watch would say, if I had had this opportunity, I would have been in the NBA or Major League Baseball or whatever. And
Sure.
I didn't want to have to say that. And I
Yeah.
had a long way to go. I'm actually doing a blog on that whole journey now, and it
Cool.
is turning into a podcast. And
Awesome. Well, we will grab that and get that up for you. I wanted to take you back to your time in Vietnam. I was looking at the notes, and you said that your naval ship was fired on by, was it a USSR at the time?
well, we were fired on off the coast of Vietnam
Okay.
by unknown assailants, and
Okay.
we were. My ship was an oiler. We were in underway replenishment at the time with our hoses all hooked up and pumping oil,
Yeah.
and this incoming splashed down pretty close to us. I mean, we
Wow.
broke off and took away, and we didn't get hit.
Yeah.
But the other incident was connected with the Pueblo incident,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and we were detailed to go out of Vietnam and go up to North Korea to refuel ships off the coast of North Korea. And
Yeah.
going through the Tsushima Straits, I was on the watch, and my radarman came up to me and said, "Sir, we have an unidentified coming up very fast from behind." So I went in on the plot and saw that it was going at about over twice the speed that we could go. It was really
Wow.
fast, and it was
Wow.
fairly big. So I
Yeah.
called the captain to the bridge. We tried to identify it, and it showed nothing, didn't
Yeah.
come back. So within a few minutes, it was a Russian frigate, heavily armed,
Oh
pulled
man.
up right alongside of us, very close, pointed their guns on us, and we pointed our guns on him. And for half an hour, we steamed like that and almost collided several times. But it was part of the harassment that Russian ships often do. One of those things that could have gone the other way, but
Oh
I'm
my
still
God.
here.
Now, Jeff, how long were you in the Navy?
3 years.
Okay, and then did you do reserves for
Yes, I did.
you? Okay,
I
okay,
was in the reserves for an additional 18 years.
okay.
And I got my honorable discharge just a few months before the first Gulf War.
Wow. When you were in Vietnam, obviously you didn't have much time to train. What was it like coming back to running in 1970?
I gained more weight than I had ever gained being at sea. I
Okay.
could only run every 3 weeks.
Okay.
And,
Wow.
and, and that was one of the other revelations, because our ship would be out there working 24/7, refueling
Yeah.
other ships. And we got in to replenish our supplies and fuel. And the only thing I wanted to do is run. And
Yeah.
again, within 10 minutes, 15 most, all the stress of that time on the
Sure.
line would go away. It was just really such an amazing release. And as you
Hmm.
know, this is what
Yeah.
happens in running. So I came back to Atlanta, 1970, and I had made that decision that I would simply try to qualify for the Olympic trials. I had no illusions of making the Olympic team. I was too far away to get that. I
Yeah.
was over 4 minutes away from what I would need to qualify.
Okay.
So that it first seemed unrealistic, but I got my plan together. I started it in Atlanta, and right at the end of my stay in Atlanta, 6 months later, was the Peachtree Road Race, which I ran and I won. Now,
Wow.
that sounds great, but there were only 110 at the time, and there was no international field. It was a few
Yeah.
people from out of the South, but it was mostly Southerners. And
Mhm.
I had gotten my shape back in 6 months, finally, to
Yeah.
be able to compete at the regional level. Went to
Mhm.
Florida State Graduate School, joined the Florida Track Club, which was in its entry year, and joined Frank Shorter and Jack Bachelor in that as a charter member of that club. We
Mhm.
ended up training together for 2 months in Vail prior to the '72 Olympic trials. And,
Yeah.
and Frank was the one that set that up. And I really owe it to him that I was able to do what I could do in making it into the 10K trials, because I still had not qualified for the 10K trials. I had qualified for the marathon trials,
Sure.
and I only had one more chance. So at the end of Vail, I drove out to Seattle for the National AAU Championships. And that turns out now to be the most important race in my career, because
Really.
I had to improve my PR by 90 seconds, by a minute and a half.
Oh my
And
gosh.
if I didn't, I would not be in the trials. And it was ideal weather, and the training at Vail paid off. I ran a 2-minute PR,
Wow.
qualified, and that was the race that I ended up going to the Olympics in, although I did help my buddy Jack Bachelor in the marathon.
Hmm. Well, now the story in the 10 was what place did you finish in the 10,000?
I was second.
Okay, you were second to Frank, and then Jack was running in third, and John Anderson the son of the Eugene mayor ran him down over the last lap. Is that correct?
In the last 40 yards of the race.
Oh my gosh.
Well, the storyline was that it was a very hot day, and
Yeah.
and I knew that I had to pick a pace that was very sustainable, and it was much slower than everybody else. I was in last place for a mile,
Wow.
and then the heat and the faster pace that Frank had set got to the runners, and so
Yeah.
I passed one runner and then another, and I passed Jack with about a mile to go in the race, ended up finishing second just behind Frank. And we waited for Jack to come around. He was clearly in third place coming off the final curve, but
Wow.
but the crowd was going crazy for the hometown favorite, John
Yeah.
Anderson.
Yeah.
And all power to John. He gave it everything he had, and he passed Jack. But what happened was that Jack was so exhausted that he was weaving. His legs had given out on him, and he bumped John as John went by. And an old AAU official disqualified Jack. I've never seen it in the 10K before or since. But
Wow.
and
Wow.
it didn't affect the race. And John went up afterwards to his credit and said, I have no protest in this. But that AAU official did not back down. So Jack was out of the results. And the
Wow.
significance was that the marathon that year was run 1 week later.
Yeah.
And had I run in the marathon 1 week later and qualified, I would have given up my position in the 10K so that Jack could be in the 10K and I could be in the marathon. That was no longer possible.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I paced Jack through, and
Uh-huh.
there were two things going on. One was he didn't think he was going to have to run the marathon, so his longest run was only 17 miles. And
Okay.
at that level, that's not enough.
Yeah.
The other problem he had is he was terrible at pacing. That's what got him
Okay.
into trouble in the 10K. And
Okay.
so I became the designated pacer for Jack. We
Yeah.
were in about 100th place at mile 1, and we just
Wow.
steadily moved up. By mile 5, we were still in 61st place. And
Wow.
I was on a mission to run a pace that both of us thought was sustainable.
Hmm.
And I stayed within 6 seconds of that through 15 miles. And by
Wow.
that time, by 15, we had moved up to 6th.
Wow.
And so we kept counting them off. And at 21 miles, we moved into a tie for third place. And
Wow.
I have to tell you two things. First of all, I just enjoyed so much helping the founder of our club and my really close friend, Jack. And I
Sure.
have absolutely no regrets for giving up my race to help him. But
Yeah.
I had to be a father confessor and a cheerleader and provide all types of lookout duties to make sure nobody was coming up on us. He kept
Yeah.
asking about that. But we
Yeah.
entered the stadium in a tie for third, and everybody was on their feet thinking that this was going to be a horse race. And I
Yeah.
have to tell you, it was the moment in running that I felt the most power I ever had, because I was the only one in that stadium that knew how that race was going to finish. So I
Now,
just ran.
did the officials give you any trouble about it at all? You didn't
Not at
try to
all.
tie, right? Okay, because you.
Not at all. We ran right together until right at the finish line. I just backed off so that Jack could coast across. We actually got the same identical time, but
Mhm.
he had coasted ahead, and so he was given the official third place.
Okay.
And what was interesting about that, Larry, which you'll appreciate, is there was all types of criticism from the track and field experts about how terrible it was to schedule the marathon only a week after the 10K trials,
Sure.
and that this was going to produce terrible results in Munich and so forth and so on. But Bill Bowerman thought that staging it that way was going to be able to tell whether somebody could come back on a double or whatever it
Yeah.
was that they were dealing with. And it turns out that Bill was right, because in 72, we had the highest finish that any country has ever had.
Yeah.
3 in the top 10.
Yeah.
First, fourth, and ninth. Jack was ninth.
I want to take you back to workouts with the Florida Track Club. So one that is legendary that I've been told, I think Barry Brown told me about this one. I think it was you, Jeff, Barry Brown, Marty LaCourie, and Frank. And there would always be a group of guys who would try to run with you. And Shorter had this workout you guys did. It was 20 times a quarter. And you start out with a 110 jog. And then the last 4, he was doing like a 50, down to a 50 jog. And so it would be down to 5 or 6 of you guys. What did you feel like at the end of I did 20 by, 20 quarters, but I would do it with I would try to cut down to a 200 jog, and I knew it was difficult. How did you do it with such a short jog?
Well, you have to realize that I had done that type of a workout in high school. For 3 years in high school. I ran 440s. It wasn't metric back then.
Yeah.
I ran 20 times 440 quite regularly, and
wow.
I would only jog for 110.
Okay. Yep.
And and so that's what I was used to. I mean, it was that part of it was okay, but I will have to tell you, trying to stay up with Frank with the 55 yards when he cut it in half, that was tough. And I couldn't keep up with him at the end.
Mm-hmm. And then I understood the way that Jack Bachelor trained, and one of my high school coaches threw some stuff at me where we would do the thing where I would do a 30-minute run and I'd do 6 times at 3:30. Then I'd do another 30-minute run, another 6 times at 3:30, and then I'd do another. And he said that he learned that from reading stuff about Bachelor. So what would you guys do? Would you go out for a run for a while, good pace, come back, do some 300s, go back out again? What was the idea behind that kind of a workout?
Well, first of all, I didn't train very much with Jack because I was in Tallahassee and they were in Gainesville.
Okay.
But on some of those workouts, regularly, about once a month, I would go down to Gainesville and I would get in a workout or two. But I didn't get very many exclusively Jack workouts. But you're right. That's the type of training that he did. He would run a chunk of distance, pretty easy. And then he would do some type of intervals, only they would usually be on a grass field.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay.
And occasionally, not occasionally, he would throw in some 300s or 200s or 250s or something like that on the track for leg speed. But he would usually do 600s or 800s or 1100s on the grass field when I was around him. Now, during those 2 months out at Vail, I ran a few more workouts with him. Yeah. And at that time, we were dealing with altitude, 8,200 feet. Yeah. So he modified the workout some, but yes, that was it. Now, I can't tell you the reasons why he did that. Because we never really talked about that. But, basically, that's what worked for him. And he really was our godfather. He was the guy that made the '68 Olympics. We all looked up to him, and we all learned a lot from him.
Sure. Your experience as a world-class athlete, going to the Olympics, and then at that time, most athletes, even distance runners, Shorter was an anomaly. You were an anomaly. I remember the '76 trials and reading about stuff before then. Amby was still running. We're going, God, where are all these old guys doing stuff? I remember seeing you in 84, 85, and then I would see you at races every year. But you started getting involved in what I call really the third running movement, where you were taking. We always talk about the first running movement as being, John Jerome, the great writer, said one time that Frank Shorter invented running by putting 26 miles together at 5 minutes per mile. It's one of my favorite lines of all times. and it's just, beautiful. But you had Shorter, you had Rogers, you had these, I call them Pied Pipers in local areas and stuff like that. But you discovered things like you don't have to beat the heck out of yourself all the time. And in fact, you could do it longer. And you were able to take the intimidation and demystify running. That's what I credit you with. I think you told me that, was it your father that you got to do some running by doing 1 minute of walking and 1 minute of running?
You have a good memory. My father, I actually tried to get my father running for many years, and
Okay.
he gave me all types of excuses. He had gained a lot of weight. Just to give you an idea, well, he went to Munich
Okay.
to watch me run with my mom, and when he got over there, he saw a lot of people much older than he was in Germany and other parts of Europe. And they were just doing all types of walking, or in some cases, running and walking.
Mm-hmm.
And he came back and went to a reunion of his high school football team. Out of 25 guys, only 12 were alive at age 52, and they had all died of degenerative diseases, and his doctor had told him that he could very well be next.
Wow.
So he started running around the park in front of his office, one telephone pole to the next. He'd run, and then he'd walk, run, and then walk. And my method of run, walk, run was similar to that. And I had told him about that, but he hadn't picked up on that. He had to discover that himself with telephone poles.
Yeah.
But the bottom line on this third running boom, which I'm credited with igniting, is that I started collecting data on advice that I gave to runners. And over the years, it's now more than 500,000 runners who I've given advice to, and they've gotten back to me. And I tabulate all of these returns as to what works and what does not work. Well, I wrote my first book in '84, it was the time when we met.
Yeah.
And that book took over from Jim Fixx's book as being the bestseller.
Yep.
And to this day, it is the longtime bestseller among training books for running.
That's cool.
It's approaching 1 million copies now by
Wow.
itself. But in any case, the gist of my method was you didn't need to run more than 3 days a week. And I'm totally still convinced that you can run almost anything. Tony Sandoval, after his 1980 Olympic trials, dropped down to 3 days a week, dropped his mileage from 120 miles down to 40 miles a week for a full year, because he was in residency, his medical residency. And a year later from the trials, he ran the Boston Marathon in 2:14. And he's not alone. I know a lot of guys and women who have reduced their running significantly to 3 days a week, and they've improved their time. So that was one of the cornerstones, and it made running doable for people rather than think that they have to go out every day. But the other major shift that I introduced was a strategy for running and walking. Okay. Now, other people have used running and walking before, but there was no strategy associated with it. So what I did is collect the data and then give people advice as to how much running, how much walking they should do based on the pace per mile. And we keep refining that, but the data is so significant now that it's very accurate. So we can really tell people what they should do based on what pace per mile they're capable of doing. And the other major complement to our method is a Magic Mile time trial, which is a reality check. And it has more than 80,000 instances of data behind it of people that have reported this 1 mile time trial and then what they've run in longer races that same season.
Wow.
So, between those three things, we can set up a training program that's very accurate and allows people a chance to avoid hitting the wall, getting exhausted, having injuries. We can take injuries away with Run, Walk, Run. And then finally, avoid puking too. I'm against puking.
Jeff, thank you. So if our listeners or viewers wanted to learn more about your programs, where do they go?
Go to jeffgalloway.com. And
Okay.
if you're interested in looking at my podcast, it really tells my story and has a lot of stories within it that have a lesson.
Okay.
Stories are only valuable if there's a lesson learned afterwards,
Sure.
or a chuckle. And
Yeah.
there's some of both in there.
Good. In the current environment with the pandemic, I put up daily training on RunBlogRun to help coaches to keep kids running, telling them to stay safe and things like that. Are you you've got a new program? I think it's a virtual training program where you're
Absolutely.
talking to people. Why don't you tell us about that? Because I was kind of fascinated with that.
This is actually a very innovative program, mainly because of our partner in this program, which is called Charge Running.
Okay.
Charge Running is an online live workout platform, which means that they hold several dozen workouts a week that are produced live with a coach that coaches people and keeps people engaged and announces the names of people who are doing the run, and it tabulates their distance.
Okay.
Anyway, what we've done is set up a training program that leads to my Jeff Galloway 13.1 race in December.
Okay.
Now, we don't know whether it's going to be allowed to be permitted in December, but they haven't told us no yet. So we're trying to do that. But if we can't run, Charge is going to do a live race. So they're going to do an online race, and whether we run in Atlanta or not, there will be this live race with a lot of energy behind it. And but each week there are 8 Galloway produced workouts on the Charge Running app.
Cool.
And the long runs gradually increase all the way up to 14 miles 2 weeks before the race. And then we have the support mechanisms too. So it's really a really comprehensive virtual training with support from people that are trained to do it.
Are you missing the traveling right now?
I miss it, but I will admit that it's given me a chance to reflect.
Yeah.
I love travel, but what I love most about travel is the ability to interact with people, solve problems. At the big races, I'm talking to 3,000 people a weekend and, solving problems. I love doing that. I absolutely love it, but can't do it now. And I don't know when that'll come back or even if it will come back to that extent, but it doesn't matter. The Zoom thing and the other platforms have filled the gaps. And so I have gone on with 3-hour training classes and 1-hour specialty classes and a number of these Zoom clinics for specific usages. And it's been wonderful. Great feedback from people.
I'm going to give you the names of 5 athletes. Actually, we're probably down to a minute. You've got 3 words to describe them. Okay, Frank Shorter.
Oh, Frank is the most focused person, most cognitive person I know. He kept talking himself through so that he never let that ancient monkey brain come in and slow him down.
Amby Burfoot.
Amby just was so dedicated. I mean, for those of you that don't know, Amby won the Boston Marathon his senior year in college, and no other collegiate athlete before or since has won Boston. And Amby came from nowhere in doing that. He didn't show that type of talent when he came to Wesleyan as a freshman. He made it happen, and he made it happen by dedicating himself to high mileage way ahead of when most people did that. He was running 100 miles a week in the front wave of that.
Okay, we're down to our last 40 seconds. I'm going to follow up with you offline about getting some links that we can put up. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. This is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun, Socialing the Distance. We feature Jeff Galloway, running icon, one of my favorite people to see anywhere in the country, and a great inspiration. Jeff, thank you so much, and stay safe. Talk to you soon.
Always love talking to you, Larry.
Thanks, Jeff. Bye now. Hey, sports fans, Larry Eder, RunBlogRun. This is Socialing the Distance, and this is the Epilogue. We just spoke with Jeff Galloway, running icon, a man who's had a running store for Fittipaldi since the 1970s. He was a 1972 Olympian at the 10,000 meters, and he was in the Olympic trials in 72, the 10 and the marathon. Trained with Frank Shorter, Barry Brown, Marty LaCourie, went to college with Bill Rogers. This guy has been everywhere. But here's the thing about Jeff Galloway. Jeff is a extremely bright man. He has that charming Southern accent, and he talks a little slow, but it's quite thoughtful, and nothing misses this guy's eyes. Back in the mid-1980s, we were down in, Jeff and I were down at the Charleston distance run. I ran about 134. I was working at Runner's World at the time. He ran about 122. I think he was fourth in the race that day. And we did our cool down together. We knew each other, and I was always fascinated with Jeff. He and Bill Rogers are two of the guys that I never could get enough of. They're just no bullshit, and they're with you and they want to be with you, which is cool. But Jeff, I was telling Jeff that, I was going to I ran a 2:07 marathon, and the way I did it was I was only training 6 days a week, and I said, "Is that weird?" And he looks at me and goes, "Larry, I'm only training 5 days a week." And I'd gone from running 120, 130 miles a week to 70 on 6 days, and my sessions were better. I was more interested, more focused, and Jeff was doing it 5 days. And, he ran a 2:16 marathon, his best. He did it at the age of 30. And he did it with walking breaks. This guy's the real thing. We talked about in the interview, the great writer, the late John Jerome, who used to write for Outside Magazine a lot. Before Outside Magazine was Outside, it was a thing called Mariah, and it became Mariah Outside. And I think this was in the July issue of 1977. And it was one of the most beautiful written lines in all of running literature. And it said, Shorter invented being 26 consecutive miles at 5 minutes per mile, one after another. He invented running. Now, I think Shorter awoken people to running. I think Bill Rogers, who is a little more accessible, brought people into running. But I think Jeff Galloway opened running up for an entire new generation. He is the father of what I call the third running movement. And these are people who never thought they could run. And he got them running a minute, jogging a minute, and doing marathons that way. I did a half marathon when I was 300 pounds, running a minute and walking 4. And I think I finished like 3,000th out of 15,000, which was really totally blowing my mind. A dear friend did that with me. She encouraged me to do that. And it was one of those life-changing experiences. But Jeff Galloway, and check out Jeff's site. We'll have all the information up on the site. He's got virtual running programs. He's got podcasts. He's got training programs. His business is a family affair. His wife's involved and his 2 sons are involved. But Jeff reminds me a little bit of a man who has had a personal experience with the Creator. Um, you know, he's from the Bible Belt, where my family's from too. I don't know if he's had relatives who were preachers for hire, but that was my family in Missouri. One of my grandpas did that, great grandfathers. But Jeff believes in what he does. He's an apostle for running, and people love him, and he's changed people's lives. And he's a little different than what we've had on the show before, but I want you to see the very layers of the sport we call athletics, what we call running. People who run a 5-hour marathon can appreciate a 10-second 100 meters or an 18-foot pole vault if it's communicated well, if it's set up as it's kept fun and entertaining. And what Jeff's done is he's realizes people's attention spans. He's demystified running. Now, there's always going to be a place for serious athletes. I got into running, and my Bible was Ron Dawes, Self-Made Olympian. And I used that training and the stuff that I got gleaned from Dick Quacks and John Walker and Rod Dixon, and set up a year's training, 2 sessions of 26 weeks each year. And when I did that, that's when I brought my 10K time, my 5K time, my marathon times down, and I enjoyed running more. And I took breaks during it as well. What Jeff has done is he's got programs, and he believes you can do great off 3 days of running a week, and I think he's right. It surely can add to the longevity. And the idea is movement. Running, walking, biking are key, especially in a pandemic. Yeah, you knew I was going to get to this. You need to exercise. You need to get out at least every few days and do something for your body. Throw on the radio and get a walk in or get a run in. And your body, your heart, your brain, your spirit are all going to thank you. Jeff gets it that running is multi-level. He's done the research on it. You can check out his sites, and we'll have that up, jeffgallowayruns.com. jeffgalloway.com, excuse me. And just Google him and check it out. But we'll have it in the story with this as well. But I hope to get him back again, because there's a bunch of other stories I want him to talk about. And at the end of the day, journalists, great journalists, good journalists, mediocre journalists, are storytellers. My dad taught an important lesson in my life by telling me stories, learning from things relatives did, learning from things that he had heard. My mama was like that too. And that's why I got into running. Jeff takes that, and he's, in demystifying running, he's brought us closer to it, and he's made it more accessible for people. So there's a lot of people out there running. They weren't running 15, 20 years ago. They weren't running 5 years ago. Hell, they weren't running a year ago. And that's fantastic. There's a place for fast people. There's a place for slow people. There's a place for in-between people. I did a marathon in 8 hours one time walking with the Penguin, the guy who used to write for Runner's World, one of my favorite human beings. I didn't even know he was going to come and join me, but he did. And I was about 320 pounds at the time. I just lost 100 pounds. And it took me 8 hours and 18 minutes. And after having run a 247 20 years before that, or 15 years before that, it was pretty sobering. But most people can run. Most people can walk. The idea is movement. And I think Jeff Galloway celebrates movement. Thank you, Jeff, for being with us today. And thank you, Mike Deering, for managing all this and putting all this stuff together and being patient with me. We've got a couple more things we're recording today. Yeah, we stay busy. So this is Larry Eder signing off. Again, stay safe. If you're going to be inside a building, wear a mask, okay? If you're going to be less than 6 feet separated from people, wear a mask. There's something that was pushed out by the CDC the other day that said, you don't need to be tested if you're around people who are sick. It's total bullshit. Dr. Fauci didn't sign off on it. Looks like the Trump administration pushed it. Science is science. Doesn't matter if you're Republican or a Democrat. This isn't about political gain. This is about people dying. And yes, you have the right to wear a mask or not. Our Constitution does say you have the freedom to be stupid. The problem is now, when you're stupid, you could die or people you love could die. That's why I say wear a mask. It's not a big deal. Be careful. Tell the people in your life how much you love them and you value them, especially in this time when we're so isolated. Get on the phone with relatives. Call the kids. Call the grandparents. Call the brothers and sisters. And exercise. Read a good book. Not online. Get something that's printed. It changes the way your brain works too, okay? So Larry's preaching, and I know you guys love this stuff. This is your favorite part of the epilogue. Anyway, this is Larry Eder with RunBlogRun, Socialing the Distance, epilogue on Jeff Galloway, one of my favorite people. And what I call him, just so you know, is I call him the Beastmaster. This man is one of the toughest runners I have ever met. Total respect. Look him up. Check out the pictures of him. The long hair, the mutton chops, the killer mustache, him and Shorter and Barry Brown duking it out on the track down in Gainesville. This is Larry Eder signing off. Have a great day. Take care.